Okay, June 10th. I know. Let's set back to the middle of the year. I just can't believe it's already June. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll all stand with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. We are getting a late start today because we had an executive session until 7:15. So we will start with public comment. Now, this is an opportunity for the public to comment on items not already scheduled for discussion on the meeting agenda. Public comment is allowed during specific agenda items that are included, scheduled for possible and anticipated board action. This includes update on student representative program and monitoring report, results one mission statement. If I remember to actually ask for public comment at that time, which I will be supported by my board colleagues to make sure I do. So I do have one person that is listed for public comment at this time, and that's Camille Wright.
Am I just right here at the mic?
Yes, and your name and attendance area.
My name's Camille Wright, and I teach at Maywood Middle School, so my attendance area is Maywood and Liberty. You ready? I've been teaching in Issaquah for 24 years. I want to begin by acknowledging the hard work happening across our district this year. It's been a year of high expectations and significant challenges. With the implementation of new curriculum and/or adoptions across multiple content areas, our educators have been working tirelessly to redesign instruction, navigate unfamiliar pacing, and meet the diverse needs of their students, all while maintaining the high standards we know are essential for learning. We've also faced increased behavioral challenges that impact not just student learning, but teacher well-being and classroom environments. Teachers are managing more than ever before, meeting academic needs, navigating behavior, and ensuring every student feels safe, supported, and included. One of the biggest shifts this year was the area of inclusion. We saw a greater push for all students to be educated in general education classrooms. While we wholeheartedly support the philosophy of inclusive education, the rapid pace of implementation, often without sufficient supports or planning time, created real struggles. Yet teachers adapted. We differentiated, collaborated, revised routines, and found ways to meet students where they were because that's what we do. With that in mind, I would like to encourage the board to consider a more intentional approach next year for visiting schools. Rather than visits that last just one period or filtered through administrative lenses, I urge you to commit extended visits, multiple periods if possible throughout the day, and to prioritize time in classrooms requested by teachers themselves. I've been in the district for 24 years and have not had one school board member in my classroom. When teachers feel seen and heard, it creates trust and gives you a more authentic snapshot of both the challenges and the amazing work being done every day. Thank you for your time and your continued commitment to supporting all of us who serve students.
Great, thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment online or in the room? So just because you didn't sign up doesn't mean you can't speak if you'd like to. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a meeting management tool used by the board to deal with items in a timely manner. Any item on the consent agenda, they've all been reviewed by the board. Any item can be pulled off by a board member at any time. Do I have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next on the agenda is the establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes to the regular agenda?
No, there are no changes to the agenda.
Then the first thing we'll discuss is works in progress. Superintendent Talliot.
Great. I'll be brief tonight, but I want to make sure that the community knows that the next installment of the latest installment of the school board series with President Moraldo and Director Mullings on district infrastructure was published this week. And it talks about how we maintain our facilities. We plan for this and what cycles we're on, and to give a peel back into the window behind what we do for our facilities and our infrastructure. And so the link there is then also how we steward our resources effectively for staff, the community, and most importantly for our students. So please check out that video as you want to learn more about that and hear continued voice from our board members on our work in different ways. This week and the next few weeks are about recognizing our graduates and celebrating all of our students as they prepare to move up or to change schools. And all of our high school and community transition ceremonies are happening this week on Thursday and Friday. So it's a busy week for everyone. And for those that go to every single ceremony as well, it's also a busy week being able to celebrate across all the different schools that are having stepping up and graduation ceremonies. All of these events sort of happen beyond that for our students who are moving to different levels or to different grades. And so I'm particularly excited to attend a K stepping up ceremony on June 24th. At the next board meeting, I want to preview that we'll be sharing a bit about our district-wide focus areas as we wrap up for the year and start to bring forward some important themes and reflections as we start to set up for next year. And then we'll also be introducing the first wave of introductions for new administrators, whether they are new to the district or in our district and stepping into new administrative positions. And that's always an exciting time because you get to see some new individuals, to hear a little bit about what strengths they have and what they bring talent-wise, and that will continue on through August as well. And finally, I wanted to share, and this will be talked about a little bit later in one of our presentations on Results 1, which is that the Washington State Board of Education did recognize 13 of our schools for closing gaps, meaning tackling areas that have been a significant attention and need. Growth, meaning our growth of our schools and students where we've outpaced our peers, and also overall academic achievement, where we have also outpaced our peers across the state. So this is a statewide public recognition and a powerful reminder of the incredible staff, families, and students that we do have. There was a slight interruption to this recognition program during COVID, but they're back on track, and they've sort of quickly caught up with those cycles to recognize schools. And I think it's, again, a great opportunity to highlight the great work of our students specifically. So that wraps up what's happening in the district right now, and I can turn it back to you.
Thank you for that. Next on the agenda is the update to the Student Representative Program. And while Marcel is coming up, I do want to say thank you to Nilla for being here. We missed you last meeting, and so we are really excited that you'll be continuing on as the student rep for Skyline this next year. So, yay. Okay,
Would you like a motion?
I would love a motion.
I move the board accept the student representatives to the board for the 2025-26 year as presented.
Second.
Okay.
Marshall Hauser, Senior Advisor in Strategy. I'm just here to support the discussion. I believe we had a chance to talk through it last board meeting, but just happy that we have all the reps in place, ready to go for next year. And again, yes, thank you, Nilla, for being here. Shows true dedication when it was optional to still show up, because she felt like she didn't show last week. She's like, had an event and wanted to show up this week and show the dedication. So that does show the quality of student reps we have in the space. So I wanted to highlight that.
Should I highlight the folks? I think most folks were introduced last meeting when I was not here.
Right. I'd love that. You were able to interview at all of the schools.
I was, yeah. Student rep program is one of my great loves. We had a phenomenal outpouring of applicants, which I know you talked about at last meeting, Matt, for the role. We will continue to have representation from all 4 of our high schools, 2 reps per school, with a set that's continuing, as Nilla is for Skyline, into next year. So we'll have Milo, Ava, and Chris returning from their respective schools. And then we just went through our selection and completed the process for the next generation of student reps. So I believe we introduced 3 of the 4 new student reps last time, but that new cohort will be, let's see, we have Micah Payao will be from Gibson Eck, Rex Garner from Issaquah High, Leah Dillip will be from Liberty, and Viday Jain will be from Skyline High School.
So before we take any action, this is one of those items that if there's any public comment, either in the room or on Zoom. Okay, seeing none. Any other comments from the board?
I will again just recognize we do have a set that are graduating. And since I wasn't here last week, I will wish them well on recording. So, congratulations to Hava from Gibson Eck, Naomi from Issaquah High, Aditi from Liberty High School, and Dashita from Skyline. They are a really critical group for us who worked on creating a student rep advisory vote to the board. And I know they're all off to really phenomenal next adventure. So congratulations.
Right. Okay, all those in favor of approving our latest slew of student reps to the board, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I can't wait to let them know.
Well, thank you. Thank you, board, for your support with the program. So.
Trying to get back to my agenda. Next on the agenda is the budget update.
Before we get started into the budget update, I want to thank Marcel Hauser for his leadership and continued commitment to supporting student voice for the board and continuing to help that space, where we provide opportunities for continued leadership for students, but also the prep spaces that you join in the mornings at 7 o'clock are very helpful for accelerating the learning for our students and helping them make sense and prepare for board meetings. So thank you, Mr. Hauser. I did want to say a couple things before we launch into the budget, which is that at the last board meeting, I had shared a preview of the legislative changes that were coming out of this session. And I do want to thank our legislators for their hard work and their expression of support for public education. But now is a time when I said that we would sort of take those inputs and roll them into our budget and to prepare that preview for you and the community. And other inputs include open collective bargaining agreements, enrollment projections that are updated, federal uncertainty. Those are all factors as we look ahead at our budgeting for not just this year, but beyond. But I'm confident in the team to focus on a few things which really, bring us back to the board development guidelines. And much of that also connects to our operational expectations for finances and how we manage our finances and the long-term goal for us as we think about sustainability and weathering the different variability in the climate. So with that, I have full faith in our team to help us steward that work on behalf of the board and the community. So with that, Mr. Turney.
All right. Hello, board. Martin Turney, Chief of Finance and Operations, joined tonight by Mariah Banasic, our Executive Director of Finance and Budget. We are going to run through a brief update, hitting on some of the points we've probably shared before, but some new ones as well. As the superintendent mentioned, we're going to point out some of the factors and the inputs that go into the budget. We're also going to kind of give a preview of the final and talk a little bit about what a 2 to 4 year approach might look like. So starting off with some of the big stuff, special education. As was mentioned, we appreciate the legislature's action on increasing funding for special education. Some of the highlights here, we're required to serve students through age 22, and that's now funded, which is always good to have things that we're required to do be funded. So we're happy to see that. The cap has been increased to 16%. If you're familiar, those of you out there, that there is a cap on funding for special education. We are not near that cap, so it doesn't really impact us, but it is good for some of the districts that are near that 16% that it's capped at now. Safety net eligibility threshold lowered to 2 times the average per pupil expenditure. That can be variable. So every year they tally up what we believe we qualify for in safety net and submit that. So we're in I believe we submitted for about $6.1 million recently. So we'll see if we are actually getting those funds back, which is good. And then the big one for us is they collapsed what used to be 2 multipliers in the formula into 1. It's now 1.16 I won't go into detail because there's a lot of background finance stuff that's going to bore you to death. But the important part is that this kicks out about $1.4 million in the next year for us, which is great. I'll talk a little bit about the fact that we're still a little underfunded in this category, but getting something in terms of new funding is great. MSOCs, another big category. This is part of the big three that was talked about quite a bit during the legislative session. So there were increases and some simplification to the categories in MSOC. Beginning in 26, 27, there's going to be some reporting requirements for us. But importantly, there was an increase. We were expecting an increase of a maintenance level. So there is a built-in increase every year. Above that, we're looking at about $860,000. And of course, what I didn't mention is transportation, which was that was the three in the big three. That one kind of fell off, but we hope to bring that back up in future sessions to try to increase funding in that area as well. So as I mentioned, still underfunded in these areas. So for 23-24, $9.5 million special education, 8.7 in MSOC. Obviously, there's a dent made in that with the increased funding. But just want to remind people that we are still underfunding. We still have a shortfall in these areas from the state. Some other items that maybe pertain specifically to us. There was an eminent domain bill that could have impacted our piece of property where we're building new high school. So at the end of the day, there are a couple provisions in there that work in our favor. One being that if we have a project in our 6-year capital facilities plan, which you approved tonight, and we do have that project in there, this does not apply. And if it was acquired by a district more than 1 year before this went into effect. So in terms of that piece of property, this does not apply. In the future, there is a possibility that the previous owner may have some buyback in certain circumstances. So there were also bills that we were tracking on front funding, which would have given districts a limited amount that they could take out non-voted debt, essentially a bond if you already have a approved levy, specifically for new construction projects, and that did not pass. There's also some temporary staffing services, a tax on that we are watching closely. We believe that this is not going to impact us, we're optimistic. I believe the intent of this bill was not to hit school districts and hospitals and those type of agencies where we have special education services that we contract for. So still watching that to make sure it's not going to impact the district. Another big impact, changes to the local levy authority. So there were increases in calendar year 2026. So the authority increased by $500 per pupil, and there'll be some growth added in subsequent years. This will obviously be something of discussion and will be factored into conversations in the next levy that the district goes out for. Transition to kindergarten. If you remember, we were able to add a couple sections in this year, and that's pretty good because they're going to fund us at this level going forward, but they will not be funding us for anything additional. So we'll be able to have those 75 students funded. It's going to be recognized as a formal grade level, but not necessarily basic education. So good there. There's also some one-time funding, $50 per student FTE coming in June. Just got the actual number, 903,000. This is good. Interesting enough, OSBI let us know that apportionment is going to be shorted in June for districts. I don't know if you saw that, but having this come in simultaneously helps with those type of things. Again, that shorting of apportionment in June is one of those things that we need to be prepared for, as these things that we're not anticipating tend to pop up now. So it's good that we have some there. And I'll let Mariah take us through some other items.
Thank you, Martin. So for 25-26, we're seeing the same trend that we had for the current school year, where we're going to be declining about over 300 students, and that's 1.9% of our current enrollment, and equals about $4 million in revenue loss. This enrollment is spread out within all the grade spans. Running Start is expected to remain high, around 700 students. So we're seeing a sustained pattern of decline, and it's one that calls for continued adjustment to how we allocate resources, staff our schools, and plan for the future. Our enrollment projection here shows the trend all the way back to 21-22 school year. It shows that we stabilized after COVID, and now we're rolling up our smaller grades through the system. And that's what we're seeing with this current year and next year. So this gradual shift adds up over time, and it reinforces the need for long-range financial and staffing plans. This graph also includes TK and Running Start. So for kindergarten enrollment, the graph on the right shows our enrollment trend as of May all the way back to 21-22. So you can see that the 977 for what we have enrolled for next year, that's on pace with our projection. We expect about 1,100 students in kindergarten. We are noticing that Maple Hills and Newcastle in the Liberty pattern feeder, they are experiencing the strongest growth, whereas Sunset and Clark have been a little sluggish. And so we worked with HR and we proactively moved staff around based on enrollment before we could for the cutoff. And then for open enrollment, we're noticing that a lot of the out of district enrollment requests are coming through the Liberty feeder pattern, Maple Hills, Newcastle, and Apollo. So we're continuing to monitor the enrollment patterns closely, especially where growth or decline is concentrated, to ensure our staffing remains aligned across the district. For our fund balance update at the March board meeting, we projected a decline of about $9 million. And since that time, we are expected to receive $900,000 in one-time legislative funding, as well as $2.3 million in transportation funding that will offset actual costs. So that will make our fund balance decline for 24-25 equal about $5.8 million. We're continuing to monitor spending and revenues closely, but this year's fund balance decline is primarily the result of a planned investment in curriculum, not enrollment alone. As enrollment continues to decline and funding levels remain uncertain, aligning our spending with sustainable priorities is critical. So here shows the updated fund balance projection, in noting that from 23-24, our fund balance percentage to expenditures will go from 13% to 11%. While this is a more favorable position than anticipated in March, it's a reminder that we must continue to plan carefully. And here is a summary view of our federal programs. So we have 87% of all our federal funding is in special education, Title I, and child nutrition. And the total amount of our federal funding is $8.6 million. And that equals 2.1% of our total budget. There are currently federal proposals under discussion that would cut at least 14% of this funding, and that equals about over $1.2 million is at risk. And then the outlook beyond 25-26 looks uncertain as well. So at the April board meeting, we presented the Start, Stop, Continue framework for 25-26. This year's budget emphasizes reallocation rather than expansion, targeting sustainability, equity, and operational efficiency. On the Start side, we expanded dual language into middle school, added high impact CTE options like aerospace and new AP offerings. We are growing capacity in our preschool and before and after school care programs. We're also supporting paraeducator hours for student transportation needs. And we are also implementing the equity-based budget for 25-26. And we'll have more information on our website and a handout coming soon. On the stop side, we scaled back the curriculum investment to a sustainable $3 million baseline. And last year's 6.5 million, or this current school year, 24-25, $6.5 million investment was deliberate and is now being sunset. We phased out outdated tools like Forecast 5 and transitioned those into internal systems. And we're also transitioned our surplus process to an online auction platform where we are improving revenue return as well for the district. So these are strategic moves that reflect responsible stewardship of public funds while continuing to prioritize student experience and access. We're right-sizing where needed and preparing for long-term structural balance. As enrollment and bargaining are known, we'll be ready to adjust, guided by our priorities and planning. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Martin to walk you through next steps and key takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just going to jump back real quick. On the equity-based budget, I do want to kind of preview. We do have, I know it's been asked for a couple times, kind of the brief summary of what that entails. We have something that we're working with communication. We'll have out very shortly that will have that. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware that that was coming. And also this, I just want to point out, this doesn't include all the adjustments we're making in the budget. For instance, enrollment decline means that we're making some adjustments with attrition and not filling some positions as we need to match up with enrollment. So again, key takeaways, we still have funding gaps. I think we know special education, MSOC, and transportation. Our expenditures continue to outpace the resources. And so actually one of the examples in the top bullet is that, you know, insurance just keeps going up and up and up. So another 11% increase that hits pretty hard when it's 870,000 we get in MSOC, but most of that's gone with insurance. That doesn't leave much else. Obviously, still a lot of considerations with enrollment to make sure that we're monitoring that and adjusting as we go. And then we do every year put out a 4-year outlook in our F-195s that we submit to the state. We really want to build up and start thinking about what a 2 to 4 year plan looks like, because we know we're going to have some conditions that are going to be with us over that time period. And we have some big unknowns like the federal funding that we're going to want to make sure we have a good plan to adjust to. So just want to point that out. What's next? We're again working in the background to finalize all these things, put them into the actual system and documents, monitoring enrollment, making sure that kindergarten numbers don't change too much on us from what's expected. Obviously, we're doing some bargaining work right now, and we want to make sure we maintain compliance. We will have within the next month that budget completed and the budget guide put together, and so we will be doing that in preparation for the beginning of August, where we bring the more detailed presentation and information for the public. So at that, thank you. And do you have any questions for us?
Okay, open it up to the board. Director Mullins?
I have a question on the transition to kindergarten. It's slide 9. I guess I don't understand the terms. It says, so it's a formal grade level, not in basic education, but yet we're capped. I guess I just don't understand that the funding's limited. Like, how do all those things go into one item?
So how I would interpret this is they have enough money to fund us with essentially what people are doing as of this moment. So they're going to say, the state's saying we don't have enough to provide anymore. They also don't want to consider it part of basic education because there's implications to that. So once they begin to call it basic education, there's a legal expectation that they have for funding. So I think they just want to make that distinction to what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so there's state funding for the current students at 75.
Right.
But no more than that. And if it was in basic education, then it has a life beyond what they would Okay, so it's
Yes.
just saying you're good where you are, don't do any more unless we were to pick up some
Yes.
sort of local expense for it. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think, so last year they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and put this out there if you want to add TK classes. And a lot of us said, great. And we did that. And then they said, oh, well, we don't have enough money for all that.
Oh.
So they kind of corrected that, but they said, we don't have enough for any more. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Director Coyne.
Great, thank you. I had that same question, but thank you for the, yeah, it's still, well, and I think it's good to note again, and thank you, Martin, for mentioning this, but obviously if it's basic education, then there's a mandate to fund. So good for our community to understand that nuance. I'm curious on the revenue recapture. I find this kind of fascinating. So specifically, I know there's the online program that we're looking at, but for Running Start, I know we've talked about this before, and I had noted down, I think was it 700 students, Mariah, that you mentioned? Are we doing anything specifically to target that population around revenue recapture? Because is the online platform intended to be Running Start as an alternative?
I'm
to
getting a
Running
no.
Start? What's that?
I'm getting a no from my colleague.
Okay.
So I think, I don't know if I fully understand the question, to be honest with you. Are you
Well, I
asking?
guess, sorry, I can rephrase it. So I guess I'm looking at, so I know the online program is an option, I guess specifically for Running Start, 700
Right.
students is a lot. Are we doing anything as a district to recapture those students back into our system?
I will answer from my perspective in that, as we have offerings that appeal to the students, then absolutely that they may return from what they're doing with Running Start. So I think from my perspective, that's probably the best answer I can give you in the moment. And looks like Dana's going to join me. So
So calling to your mind that Running Start is required and we must allow it to happen. And for the online program, it is not intended to create a path back for the students who are in Running Start. However, the college and the high school opportunity is. So the college and the high school offers same transcript at the end of the day for Running Start. And if we can get more kids to do that rather than drive to a campus, but remember that Running Start is required and we don't get to say no to that.
Thank you. That's helpful. I wonder, I know too, one of the factors that we've looked at before is just that flexibility that students like with Running Start. And I know that's one of the biggest drivers. So, and I guess it's just a comment, not necessarily a question, but I wonder how easily it will be to recapture that population of students, to be honest, but it is a big group.
Yep.
So,
and we'll be watching that as
Yeah.
Things change.
thank you.
Director Gallagher.
Just say I appreciate the update and reminders of the gaps that still exist, and in spite of the legislature adding more funding, the gaps actually grow larger due to things like insurance costs. So our MSOC needs continue to outpace what the legislature provides for us. So I know that puts us in a tight spot. And I appreciate the effort we're doing to make sure that we, maintain a fund balance. So when apportionment comes out differently at the end of the year, you don't have to worry about delivering paychecks. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
One of the items we mentioned on programming was before and after school expansion, I think was the word. I may have just written expansion. Is before and after school meant to be at middle in the next year?
So I had a meeting last week with the director, Autumn Fugger. And so to just give you information as much as I know. So she contacted all the schools to see what capacity they had to expand so they can meet wait lists at the different schools.
Oh.
And then she was looking at the staffing needs to, if there was capacity at those schools. For middle school, she's looking at, to my knowledge, she's looking at expanding the middle school camp. It's been very popular. So she's looking at doing more of that next year. So that's as much as I know, but there might be more information in regards to during the school year, middle school programming.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Wait, don't walk away because now you've prompted a question. So do we have long waiting lists at the elementary?
Yeah, at certain schools, and we were trying to entice with open enrollment. So Cascade Ridge was one of the schools where was potentially a barrier, not having enough before and after school care, and there wasn't a lot of other options for families in that area, and so that's just one example. But yeah, they depending on which school it is. Yeah.
Because I think there's been this misnomer that we've lost so many kids at elementary. They're wide open with lots of spaces to expand, classroom space into being able to expand our before and after care.
Yeah, I signed up my son 3 years in advance. So I wanted to make sure I got it.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's good for the community to hear is like, we don't have, empty school. Oh, I see. Executive Director Morse.
Yeah, hello, friends. My name is Jason Morris. I'm the Executive Director of Operations. I can provide some input on the current status of the BASC or BASC program. So this summer, we will be expanding the middle school offerings for summer programming for BASC, and we are prepared to put out a parent survey this fall to gauge interest on expanding middle school BASC past summertime and into the general regular school year. So we are expanding the summer this current month, and then we will do a survey in the fall to gauge interest for during the year care and the particular locations with hopes of expanding BASC back to as it was before the pandemic, which would be regular school year services. We may not be able to hit all 6 middle schools as we make that expansion, but our goal set is to begin that process this fall. Regarding elementary space, we have been working with all of the elementary building principals to identify space in the buildings so we can expand our programs past what is typically our current enrollment, which is anywhere around 125 kids. We have some schools that we will be pushing that number closer to the 200 mark at schools that have higher waiting lists. So we are actively working right now to expand and lower those wait lists as low as we can get them for this fall. And then we'll also be doing, as traditional, our summer BASC programs for our elementary students as well.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
their journey throughout the entire school district from, early learning to graduation, helping to alleviate the stress and the pressures that our students feel along the way, because there are key moments where that can feel very outsized, especially at the high school level. How we really look at our workforce and our colleagues and our staff, really helping to continue to foster engagement, and then really enhancing our customer service and our operations to support all of that in service of our students. This is probably Director Mulling's favorite slide next, which is about showing their alignment. And that's important to continue to see where the results and the operational expectations do overlay and have points of intersection with our goals. And
Stephen, can you advance to the next slide?
yeah.
Clicker's not working on
There's
it.
a little bit of a lag with the,
Yeah.
that's okay. Thank you. So this is what we've seen before, and it's there for reference. A couple of things I just want to say is that we have really developed a lot of systems in this past year that we refined to monitor our own progress internally and to have those conversations to make that more visible to a wider group of people and really have this be a living, breathing kind of work plan as we're working towards improving our work for students. So I do want to say that that's been a real positive thing. We'll talk more about that. But the positive thing, so this is the actual formal slide, as I referenced in my works in progress, of the incredible work of our students, which is reflected in the recognition by the Washington State Board of Education for their performance in the 23 to 24 school year, which is the year that we're monitoring right now. And there's some clicks and links here for folks to be able to click on, after the fact. But this just shows, again, the details around the closing gaps work, the growth work, and the achievement. So again, kudos to our 13 schools. You can see the full list there at a later time, but grounding ourselves in celebrations. And the amazing work is, I think, the number one thing to sort of highlight as we enter the conversation around strategic plan and how everything we do is making that better, going from good to great or great to greater. In our case, I think we are in a fortunate position to be able to say that we are continually improving and striving for excellence. Some other celebrations are really important to say around some alignment that's happening. We have 9th grade on track that's being led by one of our high school principals, and that's been really helpful as a sort of building principle to be able to work with colleagues across the district to really look at that important measure point or milestone point along a student's journey. And there are also some different tools that help support our ability to drive MTSS systems at the school building level. And then we have had some course guide alignment, which I know we talked about, and there were some awards actually given to that, not only in terms of the content, but also the formatting of that, which has been helpful. That was one of those wish we could do over many years to have greater alignment, but at least we are making that progress and showing that the course at one school is the same as another in terms of the title, but also the content and scope of work. We've had some great work working with our teachers, and I think we heard that there has been some changes to how we're approaching our professional learning and how we need to step that up. And we have some promising work, but we still know we have further to go to support our teachers in our universal design for learning. And then student voice, it's kind of embedded somewhat in the engagement. It's the thread of students is across the entire strategic plan. So there's been some really great work to continue that. And I want to make sure that we are naming that we are also thinking about how we gather information during a time of high survey fatigue for our students. And so we're constantly thinking about how we really get at the core of that on a more regular basis with some different questions on student belonging and well-being. So with that, a couple lessons learned. We've had more coordinated effort this year. We have 18 strategies, and these meetings with 18 strategy leads and priority area owners really helps create seeing intersection, but also alignment across the system. Are we going in the same direction? The benefit of a strategic plan and implementation is really about bringing people together to go in the same direction as best as we can when we're all working in such a system as large as ours in the spirit of achieving the board's vision, mission, and goals. We continually see that our work on equity needs to be brought forward and is a sustained effort that needs ongoing support. We do have capacity constraints, and you just heard a budget presentation, so we're looking at all the ways we can really consider how we are being creative with our resources, and we have good data, and I think we have really made some progress with some of our visualization tools to be able to get at data more quickly and have it be more usable at all levels of our system. And then finally, just the system integration. It's continuing to make this be part of our daily habits. The strategic plan should not be something on top of the work. It should be embedded in the work that we do, but that gives us the lift and focus so that we can tackle the areas that are most of opportunity or need. And then ongoing communication to continue that, and bringing people together to really monitor our own progress is an important next step as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Hauser, to take us through some of the priority areas in progress.
Absolutely. Thank you, Superintendent. I want to first start out by thanking the strategy leads in the space that are listening at home, but also here, but also the priority leads and all the folks that supported the work this year, because it was a lift to move through and create things that at times didn't exist in our system. So a lot of this foundation in terms of implementation has been creating a system that didn't exist. So heavy lifting to get that done. So I want to give thanks to folks that lifted that work up this year and last year. So I'm going to briefly run through just the areas, give a synopsis of what's there, but I'm going to stay with the theme of lessons learned and adjustments, and then move through the questions. So I'll try to move as briefly as possible, but I want to give a highlight of each area. Priority area 1, our student well-being area, is all about students having this feeling safe and having a sense of belonging. You can see the strategies there. The second goal is around providing basic needs support, social emotional wellness, and mental health and behavioral health supports. So you can see the work there. And as we start to look at lessons learned this year, there were a lot. I'm going to highlight one. As we look at the space there were some really good things and good work. And we talked about surveys in the space and survey fatigue, but also like collecting a lot of data from a lot of sources. We've been working as a team and as a group to figure out how do we really come up with a proactive plan around surveys in this space to really measure the ISD experience for students and staff. So that has been, as we look at, Dr. Bailey would mention this, like the decline in surveys, as we've kind of noticed the last couple of years. We're monitoring that closely, but that does impact, as we think about safety data, we think about other data points, we want to make sure we increase engagement. The other adjustment for this year, want to make sure I highlight this. It's more of an highlight, is the access to the community resource hub. So Noah Westerberg, colleague, but Shreen Carver, Dr. Carver in the space is leading that work to help bring together resources in the space where buildings can have access and they can connect to the community resources that matter most to their student populations. The second area is all around student achievement. So milestone goals, 3rd grade reading, Algebra 1, 9th grade on track. So you can see sort of the flavor in the first goal area with the strategies there. The goal 2 is all around pathways. So you start talking about student-centered learning and post-high school grad goals. It's really focused on providing unique experiences for students. So you can see the strategies related to that work there. And a key highlight from this area I want to pull forward, there were several, but one that popped out was around the learning walk. So we had a chance to walk as a cabinet team in the space and conduct site visits using the UDL framework. We also had a chance with Elena Stividas that led us in the work of equity walks this year. So we had 2 schools that jumped to the line to say, hey, we want you guys to come in and walk and give us feedback, critical feedback. So just thinking about how we were able to walk in those spaces and using a framework and provide feedback back to the staff to then use to improve the student experience, I think was a really good experience for me as a leader in this space, but also others. So that was a highlight in the learning this year for us. And then the other piece is around data tools. So I want to highlight the SIP dashboards that have been built. So I want to give kudos to Rich and the TLS team, because you'll see their work. It aligns to the dashboard you see now for the indicators, which honestly, that was a static document last year. So I'm going to lift that up, that Rich and the TLS team in short time, we're able to flip that around to a more interactive dashboard to help, with discussion and to help draw insight in that space. So I do feel foundation is being set, but I know there's still work to be done on the data piece. Diverse talent. So just highlight this area for Donna Hood in the space. It's all around. The first is about retaining or attracting staff to us. So we were matching our students that we serve. So we want population or teachers to sort of reflect the students we serve. Then the second goal is around retention. So it's around matching that belonging, feeling that students have in the space. How do we work that for staff as well? Lessons learned, I'll just highlight the top one, which is City U, being one of the top very successful event to recruit staff. I think CWU or Central Washington University was another encouraging event. So we're learning, and I'll let team Donna would say, it's learning every time you go out, how many staff you're getting, but those have been 2 very successful events to go to year over year. And then the other piece is just to continue to monitor and align like the well-being piece around staff, because it's not enough to say that we're focused on students if staff don't feel that same sense of belonging and safety in the space. So we're consistently looking at how we align to that work in the same way. And asking, I know Donna put out the STAY survey 2 years running now to really assess and ask around well-being of staff. So we are using that data to then make informed decisions to change practice. Authentic engagement, so it's around listening and following up with constituent groups. That's the first goal. And then the second one centers on partnerships in the space. So as we start talking about building new partnerships, but also continuing to develop relationships and nurture those partnerships. I'll highlight here one big partnership that we landed or started to develop with, and folks on the dais are familiar with Microsoft. There's some folks here that know that company a little bit, right? It's been very fruitful for us to connect with them. I got to say, we joined the Technology Access Program. So we've been able to join on a co-pilot test group. So we're seeing the product earlier, very beginning stages, but we'll have access to new features, but also be able to provide feedback on sort of their testing ground. A group of program managers and folks, they visited the district and had a chance to connect with us and talk about a future site visit in buildings. But I just would say the Microsoft one is a gift that keeps on giving, because every time we talk to somebody, there's another sort of way they want to engage and support us pro bono in some way. So to me, to be in the backyard, that's been a big lesson learned that we've just started to lean into that a little bit deeper this year. And then the other piece is, the top bullet is around just the collaboration approaches. We know we don't know the best way at all times. You have to continue to grow how you engage. So we're learning. How do we continue to maximize those partnerships, but really spread throughout the system ways to engage in ways with folks that is building stronger partnerships to support students. And the fifth area, last but not least, to Mr. Turney, so it's organizational effectiveness. And the first is all around continuous improvement in the space. You know, in a time when Martin and team talked about the budget and finances, we must think about ways to work more efficiently, smarter, in ways that are more proactively serving students. So stuff we need to stop, and stuff that is more impactful, we need to do. So I think that one is really pushing the system to continue to grow in that way. And then the second goal is around the equity-based budget, which you heard a bit from Mariah Banasic and the team. So highlight, and I won't just repeat because we talked about the equity-based budget, but that's a big piece that's being integrated in the budget cycle. So that there's very intentional planning around that. So that's the adjustment for next year, just going forward in that space. And Mariah shared a bit about that prior. And the last next steps, and I'll just highlight, we're always continuing to look for ways to improve the ISD student experience. And so we think about program offerings. I just visited the ISD celebration, so the ISF, I'm sorry. I'm at an ISD celebration here at the board meeting. Okay, I call it a celebration. But we visited the ISF celebration. And to me, it was great sitting in that space with that partner, those partners, and just hearing even feedback. It turned into a mini informal feedback session for me. And I was like, telling Mark, I was like, Mark, tap me out of here. Like, get me out of here. But it was great feedback from them that's sharing their experience and sort of like their perspective on the district and improvement areas, things that are going well. So I think we're always looking for that feedback. We're always looking for folks to tell us their perspective, and we're not ducking away from that kind of feedback. We want to get better. So that's what I'll end with. And moving to questions, and I'll just say that in the package, we don't have the dashboard up, but I know Steven's ready just in case we want to show that. So I'll stop there and take the board discussion and questions.
Okay, so we'll start with public comment. Is there any public comment in the room or on Zoom? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to board questions. Don't all start at once. Director Gallinger.
I'll kick us off. I really appreciate that dashboard. I'd love for you to bring that up because I can't imagine the amount of work that went into that. Yeah. And my question is for the part about the diverse talent piece, and where when you look and compare what certificate all for percent of staff who feel a sense of belonging at work
Mhm.
versus certificate for staff of color. It's a pretty significant gap, and it's going the wrong direction. And then we see that our percent of staff that are of color has dropped below our baseline that we had when we established this in like 2-ish years ago.
Yep.
So I think what I didn't see in the report was so what are we doing about it? And
Mhm.
maybe I missed that because I know there was a lot of like sometimes the columns, like trying to read the columns through as they cross pages. And I get you, the formatting. I'm not complaining about the formatting. I understand how you did it and why. So maybe I missed it. But if I would love to hear sort of, I'm sure you guys talked about it, but what the talking about it was and what some of the initial, hey, what are we going to do differently? Because
Mhm.
it's one thing to increase the diversity of your pool, but if you get the diversity of your pool and you bring them in and then you lose them, then you're not getting there. So
Yes, so there's two fronts on making sure that we have representation that better matches our student population. And I will say that there's some emerging data that does say that I think to a Director Coyne had asked this question at a different meeting, and I can't remember exactly which one. How do we compare it to some of our peers? I think that we are actually outpacing some of our peers in the state for the levels of representation. We're emerging, that data is emerging through a study, so we'll share that as we get that. But one is we did see a decline in the total number of openings, so more people were staying in our district, and so that meant that every single number of individuals that came in the door. Certainly, the numbers didn't work right in that favor. So the second is, and that's a good thing that people are staying. That's part of the stay survey work and making sure that we're increasing our support for our teachers in particular. The challenge, I think, with these numbers is they can be highly variable. So you can get a boost one year and then maybe a sharp decline another year based on the numbers that are going into the numerator and denominator. But I will say that we have work to do. And so one of the things that we have done is increase our pool. So you see higher diversity in our pools, but we have fewer number of openings. So that's working on the recruitment side, but that's not necessarily converting into the numbers, getting into the spot of being a certificated team member in our district. And then once we have our colleagues, we recently just wrapped up the year with our educators of color. We've been investing in having affirming spaces for our leaders of color. And that is something that actually originally the Puget Sound ESD was offering, but then we've taken in-house now after going through some training and having those spaces available to our teachers. So now we do that here with our teachers. And we got really great feedback from the teachers that were participating that space for them was safe, affirming. And they had feedback too, but they want to make sure that it's maintained and continues and can grow to serve more staff. I think what's hard is sometimes, and this is from my own personal experience as well, when you're the only one in your building, if you're in a small team, a small elementary school, you might be the only one represented of your identity marker. And so having those cross-district spaces is really, really important to have connection and a sense of belonging. So those are some things that we are working on in terms of our current employees, but also continuing to seek out the pipelines where we can attract really diverse talent. Our partnership with the WEA has also been helpful in terms of the teacher residency, and that's brought in more also teachers of color. I think alternative pathways oftentimes can serve as in that method as well. So I do want to say that that's the challenge we're working with, right? Is sort of the available spots and who's coming in the door, and also retaining people, and also ensuring that we grow our supports for all of our staff.
has it been a factor at all in how you choose who's going to be participating, like the grow your own part, the people that are going to start from our district in that pipeline or who have started?
We've actually seen outside talent come. Oh, that got very loud. We've seen outside talent coming from into some of the pathways, and that's been really helpful as well. And we continue to invest in our classified staff and our paraprofessionals. And so that's another area that we continue to make sure that we have support for. And that is, we've seen some increases in our classified staff in terms of representation. And that also matters because they play a role in supporting our kids on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Director Coyne.
Maybe I'll just add one note to that too. I think one, the residency program, again, I know we've touched on that before, but I think it's just a big highlight here in the Issaquah School District. And, kudos to Dr. Bailey for wonderful work in spearheading that. I think I'm excited to see where that continues to go. I do suspect, given market volatility, that we have fewer people, not necessarily fewer, but I'm sure that there are individuals who are holding off on potential retirement. And so because of that, you get, it does stop some of the potential turnover. So you have that, I think, would probably be impacting some of the new talent coming in the door too. And I think it's just the nature of the market. We can't control that here in the district, obviously. So I think it's important to note that too.
Director Mullings.
I guess I just want to go back to Director Gallinger. You said you wanted to see the dashboard. Did you want to go back to that? Okay. I just want to respect that before my next point.
So then it would be the staff indicator button, a little bit lower, Steven.
It's the trend. Yeah, it's a staff trend.
Indicator.
So it is very helpful to be able to have this amount of data at hand. So I think that's great. And I think it's great to pull out a particular piece. I think mine is more of a reflection than a question, maybe a couple reflections. One has been like, is this too many things? Right? Is it too many things to try to focus on all at once? And I would tell you that maybe before the last month, I would say it's probably too many things. Something has changed my opinion on that though. And I've just been sitting here reflecting on our last board town hall, which was very good attendance. I think, what do we have, like close to 30 people who were there. And what I thought was interesting is in some way or another, the questions or conversation touched on something that's in one of these points. And so I think it probably is a overly zealous list to go after and attack. But on some levels, I think it validates for me that these are all really important things to the way we're trying to constantly review and improve, understand where we are now, understand how we can, do the wide range of things for providing safe spaces for staff, to students, to operational efficiencies in one place. So I mean, the one I thought was really interesting, you hit on it really quickly, was the course guides, right? That was one of the items that across all of these topics, it was actually when I pulled up during that town hall, when there was questions and comments around, I guess, a sentiment of frustration that even in electives, that there was a very heavy burden on students. And it was actually really great to be able to pull up and say, well, there's a recent update to these course guides that shares how much homework, so that at the time of course selection, there can be more informed decision making. So they all seem almost, it seems like a very long list of things, but when I reflect on it through the lens of that town hall and all the concerns that various people brought to bear in that discussion, it really does seem to be a good survey of areas that we need to understand, areas that we need to improve and be responsive to what our community is telling us. So part of me would love for it to be shorter so it could be more focused, but I think at the same time, it does feel like a very sound set of items that if we get better at, we know we get better at as a district.
Can I sign up for the shorter list as well? Okay, why are you listening? I think we all are sharing that reflection. I think we've talked about this, but that I think the beginning stage is just we had to set so much foundation and implement a lot of things that didn't exist in the space yet. So I think having 18 made sense. But to your point, for us to really get, I'm gonna use a medical term, surgical on like really pushing the results now that we're measuring in a way and looking at targets, it does bear the question, like really sit with, do we combine efforts? I'll give you one example in our spaces, partnerships. And we've talked a lot with the student well-being space with resource partnerships. We're doing a lot of crossover work around gathering partners, figuring out a list, sharing it with people. So there's a lot of crossover in that space. That's just one. So we're naturally combining efforts in ways. And next year, I'll talk this about with Noah Westerberg around partner. But I think there are some areas we could sort of combine our efforts to be more impactful. So we are also reflecting on that.
Director Taylor.
I'm just going to lend my voice to this same exact point. So when I sat down on Sunday night, actually, to read the monitoring report, I read the whole thing. And then the first thing I wrote down here in my notes is, are we prioritizing too many strategies in the strategic plan? And I did the counting, 18. So I think it's just an honest question. And this might be more for looking forward when we start to refine or draft the new strategic plan in a year or so. But the point being I agree with Director Mullings, it is good to get your arms around all the priorities. But then the question becomes to me, should we not be prioritizing the strategies then and trying to push the priority strategies forward and leaving the others be for a while to when we have the resources to do it? Because I read a lot of this, and a lot of the objectives, goals had 2, 3, 4 strategies with each one. So my thought was, well, shouldn't it, or does it not make sense to decide what are the 1 or 2 we want to get those done, and then move on to the next 2 or 3? So it's just my takeaway from reading it. All great work. And I also a big fan of the strategic plan. I think it's super important for the district and for our community, for people to be able to say, okay, what are the priorities for the district? What are we working on? But I would encourage us in the next iteration to try to prioritize the work itself in maybe a more sequential fashion. So that's all.
Superintendent, did you want to respond?
Yes, so to add on to that, as Mr. Hazard said, we were setting the foundation. So you actually do see a mix of strategies that are about getting some work done that was sort of like, oh, we wish we could do that. And so it got some lift. And so those would be like sort of one-time kinds of events or investments in resources and capacity. But there's others that are really focused on and that become part of our regular habits versus it being part of a focused strategy. But then there's others that I think are more specific to driving towards student experience and well-being, which is I think where we'll probably see more of a focus as we get closer to that refresh time. But I think it's important to note that, yes, I think we all agree that this is the learning here was like, okay, we had a mix of things. Some were like, just get that big rock done that no one's wanted to carry or could carry over the past couple of years, and let's just accomplish it and then set that in motion. And others were about, hey, this is just lifting up some of the work that just needs a little bit of a boost, and that should be ongoing regular work that we do monitor and measure as well. But I do want to say that these metrics as well don't live outside what happens in other monitoring reports. Like the measures here you see in some of our results monitoring for academic and foundations in particular. You see them in our school improvement plan. So when you talk about, Director Mullings, like this level of detail for these, we're actually pulling out the ones that have already been talked about in a way that gives us a finer point to see, are we making progress, and are we making progress to the goals that we set for ourselves? So this is tracking, to be clear, this is tracking like the goals relative to what we're saying we want to accomplish, because we know that we need to move the needle in certain areas. So you'll actually see an example with some of our achievement data that we have very outsized goals for where we are behind. And that's why so in order to close gaps between students who are experiencing different levels of achievement, you actually have to have a faster pace for those students to be able to address those gaps. So I wanted to go back to that and say, this is something that we create ourselves, and we have control and influence over how we might shift that in the future.
And when I look through, so one of the things that really struck out to me is really around the academic opportunities and areas where we've really seen those key highlights. And so as I look through all of the strategies that are listed, I'm thinking, well, that's a really good thing, important thing to be focused on. That's an important thing to be focused on. And so it was hard for me to, where would you cut in those? I think there's like 6 or 7 strategies, and they're not small. They're, design and implement universal design for learning. Okay. I mean, so to some effect, I do want to say that it is encouraging to see this, because it just shows, and I love the way it's structured. And I also appreciate that we spent several meetings going over these 5 priorities, and you're learning so that many of the slides you showed, we've seen over the past several meetings. I think that's actually a great ramp up to then getting this report. But it's hard for me. I think that we are seeing a movement in some of these areas, and it would be hard to say, well, we kind of have done that. So then we don't have to focus in on it. Because I think I had mentioned before about, our SIPs at our schools, 1 year we'll do a 3-year for English, and then you just see our math numbers kind of go down. And so, I don't want to take my eye off the ball. All of those things are really producing some really good results. And for me, the academic opportunities is one of the strong things that we're prioritizing. It's actually what we're supposed to be doing.
Which I
Director
asked Steven
Gallagher.
to click on the student academic trend. And I agree with you. Our most important work is this one. Can we move off the thanks? So it'd be helpful in this view to know what you guys are using for your measure, because I can't tell. And when I hover over things, it doesn't say, is this iReady data?
Yep.
So I think that would be helpful because it's what for me, formative versus summative. But my question is, at some point we have to decide and how much makes a trend. So the intent of this and the intent of all your work of the strategic plan is to close gaps. And I wouldn't say that it widened. That's unfair with this, but it certainly didn't close at all. And I want to marry up our strategy with our budgeting and supporting of our classrooms for what I would like to see. Part of the equity-based budgeting for me is if you guys say, well, we didn't close gaps this year. We think it's going to require X amount of support in order to do UDL better, to deliver better supports for our students with disabilities. That's what I hope that the narrowed focus of, I don't care that there's 18. I have less heartburn in a district as big and complex as this. But I do want us, to your point about let's get strategic on what are the asks of us that we need to be driving supports for into the classrooms. Because that's the point of this, is like, we don't just talk about the budget in like 10 of our meetings for fun. We talk about it in relation to this. And I think that's where I worry that part got lost in all of the attempt to do such detailed monitoring and reporting in the monitoring report with, I think it's not, what's missing is like, so where do we take it all from here? And how do we actually move the needle? I think it was more in what I sense as a report of, here's where the needle is. And I want us to pivot the conversation to like, well, how do we move the needle so we show meaningful gap closure? Because if we can do it in 3rd grade, it makes their journey so much easier.
So a couple of thoughts. I appreciate you going to this. This is where my brain was actually when we were talking earlier about gap closure in particular. And for us, so iReady is the sort of leading-ish indicator because we can look at it multiple times. So I would, all these measures are actually publicly available with OSPI. And I think that's been an important value of the board to have the data be able to be reflected here, but also on the OSPI report card. But we have this one because we are able to get multiple points throughout a year. This is why targets, it's getting late. Targets and trajectories are so important because when we look at the implementation of key things that we're doing, whether it is boosting our enhancement around staff training and UDL, and then developing MTSS systems, or it's actually investing in a new literacy curriculum, I wouldn't expect to see a bump in performance overall, but then also in terms of different groups of students and their experience until maybe year 2 or year 3. So if year 0, the planning year that we did this strategic plan was the actual adoption of the literacy curriculum, Actually, that was last year. Now, yeah, so you have to marry the timelines. So one of the strategic plan was to get the literacy curriculum up and running. This year was the first year implementing it. And so we have lessons, I think, as well from how that's going. I would expect to see some changes next year, both in terms, well, I would expect to see some changes maybe in SBA this year, and then maybe next year as we look at the iReady measure. So I wouldn't expect to see a change right now. But that's why we talk about targets and trajectories. So when are we lining up our timelines of implementation for something that we believe is going to have an important outcome for our students? And then when does that actually happen? And then that's where the investments come into play as we talk about last year we did, say we were making these big investments in curriculum, and that's why we're continuing to enhance that as well. So those are just one example.
I appreciate that. And I think that's why this, as it goes public facing, having those footnotes are really, really important. So community members, even staff, can make meaning of the data and to know like, hey, in 2022-23 school year, we adopted new literacy curriculum. In 23-24, actually not, in 24-25, we started University Design for Learning. I mean, so those things, because those will get lost. Those get lost when we have board turnover, when we have like, there is parts that just like, well, what year was that? And the whole school year is just a weird thing anyway, since everyone crosses a year, like that's very challenging.
That is helpful. We can certainly make some of these important notes because as you would see with any chart, sometimes it's important to call out those moments. Like when you see economic data, you should remind ourselves there was a recession in 2010. So like, why do we see data drop? So those are important things to apply to this work. And I will say that, this is why I said these are our targets. Like the people don't like to put out this data because they're going to invite a lot of discussion. But the more we can help people with that discussion, the better. So I appreciate that.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we do have a motion before us. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much for all of this diligent work. There's so much that goes into these reports, and I want to reflect that just reporting to us takes a significant amount of staff time. And thank you for the meaningful information to you and all your colleagues that
To
put
the
this
team.
together.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, I can't believe it. We're at announcements and correspondence. I'm like, really? Wow. Okay, announcements and correspondence. Yes, if for those in the audience, this is definitely the time to leave. This is the boring part. So we do have our announcements and correspondence listed. Any other addendums from board members? Hearing none, we will move on to calendar and future agenda topics. So one of the things we need to review is the monitoring report calendar for 2025, 2026. Yes.
I move the board adopt the policy governance monitoring calendar for 2025-2026 school year as presented.
Second.
And I think we're just gonna slip in that it's coherent governance now and not policy governance. But the only thing I think there was a red mark on this with a comment. And so maybe you could share with that.
I can explain in the past. Director Gallagher, are we going to? Okay. In the past, two reports were split up into internal and external to account for audits to be released and sort of those that timing. So in the coherent governance shift, we talked about merging internal and external. It was just getting a little bit confusing. So we can, with the timing of where we currently are with audit releases, we can actually collapse them. So that was discussed. So this was a note to remind us that we did that and to have that also on the record. We also added OE 17 to the monitoring calendar, since that was also adopted this year by the board.
Great.
I'll just say a minor edit is at the very last one on the right for the finalized monitoring calendar. Should be 26-27.
Okay, so any other comments or questions? So I think those amendments can be made. So they're probably typographical in nature. All those in favor of the monitoring report calendar for the 25-26 school years, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Then I do think we have something around the WASDA annual conference is going to be November 20th through the 23rd. It is in Seattle. I guess they felt they outgrew the Hyatt in Bellevue.
Yeah, I think early identification with students so they can plan accordingly for their year and to identify who's going will be a huge thing for them. And registration, early registration, because I think there's just going to continue to be like what's driven us to a bigger venue has been students. So, right, because obviously the school directors were static as far as the number, but what has changed is we went from 50 students to 200 students attending.
Yeah.
And I think next year it will be even bigger. So it seems to grow by 50 to 100 every year. So when it's on the west side. So we want to do early registration, even if you don't know who's going and committing, to like lock in the spaces.
Okay, so, and I don't know that we are ready to, we'll figure out who's attending and registration. So when does registration open? Do you know? We've already been registered. So if you are interested in attending, and then we can also be planning for board night out, which is a good time, and we'll be doing that with our students or typically, or we can decide. Maybe we have one that's a board night out and one that's a everybody night out.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And then hopefully we'll be presenting on one of these days as well.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on calendar, or is there future agenda topics that we are interested in? I've given the superintendent a very long list of items for the board retreat that we're eventually going to have to kind of screen down, but we are making plans for items there. But if there are things that you are thinking about, especially as we wrap up the school year and the monitoring reports for this year, thinking about, are there certain agenda items that you want as we continue forward? You can tell me through December. Anything else? Okay, with